Hello and welcome back to Brad Data DevHub. In this tutorial, I'm going to take you through variables in Python. So let's kick in and start this tutorial. So we're going to head to our VS. So just a recap before we go on. Python is a high-level programming language, and Python it is an interpreted language, meaning during execution it's interpreted line by line, which makes it easier to debug. But on the downflip, it makes it a bit slow compared to compiled languages such as Java. It is dynamically typed, meaning you don't have to define the type of a variable you have, e.g. a string or an integer, and much more. It is embeddable by other languages such as Java, and with that, let's head in and look onto variables. So to start with, a variable is like a container used to hold values. Taking an example, let's say you have stationaries and let's say you have pencils, rubbers, and pens, and you want to have them classified, ordered, or stored differently to maintain order and for easy accessibility. You are going to have three containers: one for pens, one for rubbers, and one for pencils. And each container is going to contain a unique identifier of it. So each container is going to be used to store the different category of the stationery. So the same case applies in Python. A variable is like a container used to store values. A value can be a string, an integer, a float, or much more. Don't worry too much. We are going to look at data types in Python in the oncoming tutorials. So to begin with, let's take an example of our stationaries to make it much clearer. So I'm going to open a new file to create a new file. Let's call it main.py. Now we have this stationery of ours, rubbers, pencils, and pens, and we want to store them separately so that we can easily access them. And we are going to have a unique identifier of each. So each container is going to represent a variable, and each stationery is going to represent a value. So let's begin. Uh, let's start with pencils. Now we are going to put it in brackets. Brackets represent lists in Python. Don't worry, I'm going to cover that in an oncoming tutorial. So we are going to store our values in this list. So let's say our first pencil is HB. Let's call another one. You can give me another pencil name down in the comment section below. I'll be glad to check out on them. But for now, let's call this one Vanta Black. Yeah, like that. So this is going to be our pencils container. Let's move on and look at our another container, which is going to be pens. So for pens, let's say we have a green and a purple pen. So let's have green and purple, and finally we have our rubbers. Let's say we have a red and a blue rubber. Yeah, like that. So we have three different containers, and again container represent the variables. Now these containers are used to store these values in here, which in our case are our stationaries. So uh, these are our variables. So let me just comment this out. So our pencil, rubber and pen, which are in blue, represent variables. So let's call them blue since they're represented in blue, and we say they represent variables. Let's put it in parentheses. And then we have our values right here. The one that are in red, they are strings. So our values in red represent our stationaries, which in this case, since here we got variables, let's have it here as values. Now what to keep in mind is that our values represent our stationaries, our variables represent our containers. To make it much more clear, let's have this here. This is our container, and for the values, this these are our stationaries. I want to believe this is the correct spelling for stationaries. So if we want to access our values, we are going to refer to our container in order to access them. Let's give it a try. So we are going to use the print function that we used in the previous tutorial. So the print function is used to print out. For most purposes, is used in the CLI. CLI simply stands for Command Line Interface, which is our terminal. Now the VS Code has the terminal that it comes with it installed in the VS Code. So on most occasions, we are going to use the terminal down here below. And again, I have the Python extension installed in my VS. If you don't yet have it, you can come to the marketplace. You can type Python and you have it right here. So the Python extensions majorly helps in debugging and linting. As you can see, if I hover around here, it shows this is a variable and it contains rubbers. No, it's a variable rubber and it contains a list which got strings inside it. Don't worry, I'm going to explain that. So, so now we have these three variables and we have the values that are assigned to these variables. So these variables right here represent our containers, the three different containers with different labels. And right here we have our stationaries which are stored inside these containers. So anytime we want to access any stationery of ours, we have to refer to our container which is a variable in order to access our values. So let's give a clear example of that. We are going to use a print statement to access our values using the variables. So we are going to use to access our stationery by referring to our containers which is the variable. So let's start with the first one. So when I run this, it's expected that we are going to access the values that are in pencils. Let me clear my terminal and here they are. So let's try on the second one and it's done. And here it is. These are our values and we have accessed them by referring to our pen which is our container. So we are using this container to access our values which in this case is our stationery. This is our blue, no, our green and purple pen and they are right here. We have accessed them by using the pen variable. So let's move on to rubbers and when I run this again we have access to our rubbers. This is our blue and red rubber and this is our container that we have used to access our rubber which was the blue rubber and the red rubber. So let's have all of them printed all together. Let me copy this. To copy it's Control plus V and then paste it Control plus V. So if we run this in our terminal, it's going to print out the values that are stored in these variables. and here they are. So here we have accessed our stationaries which are stored in our containers by referring to our containers. So on the next part, we have the concept of overriding a variable. So right here we have three variables: a variable rubbers, pens, and pencils. So if I happen to use the same variable down here, let's say pen, and assign it to 2, it's going to override the initial pen and it's going to print out 2, since this is going to be the new value assigned to this variable, and by that way you'll have override this variable pen, and it's the same concept with any other variable that you're going to have. Let me comment out this. Uh, by commenting, this simply tells the interpreter to ignore this statement. Don't worry, I'm going to cover that on an oncoming tutorial, but just keep in mind, by commenting using the hash, it simply tells the interpreter to ignore this statement. So if we come and print, so instead of rubbers, we're going to have pen. As you can see, it's printing out true. So by this, we have override the first variable on top right here. So let's dive in and focus on the naming convention of variables. Now, naming conventions are just considered as best practices which can help in, especially while working on a project with some team members, which helps the team to easily identify and reduce confusion in terms of naming of variables and other parts. So let's see on what are the best practices. So when naming a variable, it can begin with either an underscore, a capital letter from A to Z, or a small letter from A to Z. Let me print it out. So here it is. It either begins with a capital A to Z, a small letter A to Z, or an underscore. This begins the naming of a variable. Secondly, only class names begin with caps. We are going to cover classes on a much on coming tutorial, but just to keep in mind, functions, variables, and all other stuffs begin with small letter, but classes, the first initial letter of a class begin with a capital letter. So for functions, we use div. Don't worry, we are going to cover this on much more coming tutorials. And for classes, they are defined by class. Now this should not worry you too much because we are going to cover this on coming tutorials. So for now, it's just okay to keep in mind that classes begin their first name with a capital letter. So in case you're having a private identifier such as a username, it begins with an underscore. Let's say something like a username. So most of the time it begins with an underscore like that. And if you have something more private, let's say like a password, which takes two underscores, then password. So you can have that for our naming conventions of variables. So from here we can look on assigning variables two variables in the same line. It's pretty simple. I'm going to show you that right now. So we're going to come here. Let's say you can call them A and B. So we're going to have A and B as our variables, and we're going to assign values to A and B. Let's say let's say let, let's call this hello, and assign B with hey, assign B to hey. So when you print out, we have these two two variables. We are going to access these two values by using these two variables. It's pretty much easy. So down here we are going to have our page. So when I run this, it's going to print out hello, which is going to be assigned to A, and it's going to print out the value B, the value A, which is going to be assigned to the variable B. Let me run this so we can see it. Mm, let me comment this. So here we have them. We have the variable, no, the value a, which was assigned to b, and the value hello, which was assigned to the variable a. So something to keep in mind is that we cannot access a variable before defining it. So let's say right here, we remove this a, and let's put c. Python is an interpreted language, so it's going to bring out an error even before we reach to b. Let me run this, and you can see it brings an error. C is not defined, and it's right here. We are getting a name error. C is not defined. So this, unless you define a variable, you cannot access a variable that you have not defined. And with that, we come towards the end of this tutorial, and you can try out some other variables of your own preferences during your own practice. Let me know down in the comment section below the variable that you find most preferred to use as per your choices. You have some nice time, and let's meet in the next tutorial.